This is day 176 of reading the entire Bible this year. Today we are on 1 Kings 15 and 2 Chronicles 13 through 16, and they're kind of woven together, all of these bits. So we're going to take them kind of a piece at a time in the chronological order. So in 1 Kings 15, 1 through 8, we get an account of Abijam, the king of Judah. In 2 Chronicles 13, the whole chapter covers a king named Abijah. Same guy, alternate spellings. In 1 Kings, mostly what we get is that Abijah takes over in the 18th year of Jeroboam's reign, and he only reigns for 3 years. They're at war pretty much the whole time he's king. He's at war with Israel, and then he dies, and his son Asa takes over as king. The reason why his line is allowed to continue has nothing to do with him. He does not follow the Lord well. Instead, what we hear is that he has done all the same sinful, horrible, idolatrous things that his father did, but for the sake of David, the Lord allows his line to continue, and he has lots of sons and all of this. In 2 Chronicles, we get a slightly different picture of him. In some ways, Abijah does claim the Lord. He doesn't necessarily follow him well. He's still doing the practices that Rehoboam and even Solomon had set up and established in Judah and in Israel. But overall, he's still claiming Yahweh as his God. Not necessarily walking in his ways, but he's claiming him, which is a maybe small step, but a step beyond what Jeroboam is doing. As we read throughout 2 Chronicles, we find out that Jeroboam, on the other hand, is not doing anything to follow the Lord. And Abijah points that out. He taunts him and he says, hey, how are we going to fall against this guy? It doesn't matter the size of the armies or anything else, because look at him. They worship golden calves. We serve the Lord. Anybody can be a priest there. Our priests are only the sons of Aaron. We still trust in the Lord. It's our trumpets that blow for the Lord before we go to battle. All of this, there's no way we can lose. While he's making this big speech, Jeroboam sends a secret team around to try and sabotage Judah's army. And when Judah realizes they're being attacked, they rout them, totally win. The Lord seemingly is with them. And then Israel's army gets kind of wiped out, and Judah comes out way victorious. And so that damages Jeroboam's ability to wage war and defend Israel for the rest of his reign. After 3 years, king of Judah, Abijah comes to the end of his life, and his son Asa takes over. Now, Asa is different. He's more like David initially. It says that he starts off by tearing down some of the idols. He does what is right in the eyes of the Lord. And because he does that, there's peace in Judah and Israel for 10 years. So the Lord really honors those who turn to him. So among Asa's reforms are tearing down all of the shrines and the Asherah poles, even deposing his grandmother as queen mother and making sure that she doesn't get to do anything anymore because she had set up Asherah poles. And then he burns that Asherah pole in the Kidron Valley, cuts it down and burns it. And so he does a pretty good job. It says he doesn't eradicate all of them, but he does a pretty good job of getting rid of them, eliminating the shrine prostitutes and all of that, and then also making sure that Israel follows the Lord. And he does that for most of his life. In the meantime, in Israel, there's a bunch of shaking up. 2 years into Asa's reign, Jeroboam dies. His son takes over, and he barely starts serving as king when just under 2 years into that, Baasha, son of Ahijah from the tribe of Issachar, comes in and kills him and takes him out. And now he sets himself up as king, or the Lord does. And remember, that was something that the Lord had promised he was going to do. He had prophesied through a different guy named Ahijah, through a prophet, saying, because you set up these golden calves to worship Jeroboam, I'm going to take out your line. And so now it happens. So we've been from 2 Chronicles 14, 1 through 7, and then over to 1 Kings 15 for 9 to 15, and then all the way through the end of 1 Kings 15 through 34. And that has caught us up to what's going on with the kings of Israel And so if we jump back to where we had paused in 2 Chronicles, someone from Cush, which is around the region of Ethiopia, comes up with what it says is 1,000,000 men, or at least 1,000 thousands. So that's either 1,000 times 1,000 in Hebrew, which would be 1,000,000, or it means thousands upon thousands, which would still be way more than Asa has. It's at least 2-1. And that's the point we're supposed to catch, is it's a whole lot more. And yet the Lord's going to show up in Asa's favor. And so the Lord defeats the Cushites or the Ethiopians, depending on which translation you're looking at and which way you're figuring the geography, with more modern language to describe it, or with how it was reckoned back then. So then in 2 Chronicles 15, we get to hear about the revival that began to happen in Israel under Asa's reign. And it's kind of inaugurated by a prophet. It says, the Spirit of God came on Azariah, son of Oded. So he went out to Asa and said to him, Asa and all Judah and Benjamin, hear me. The Lord is with you when you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you abandon him, he will abandon you. Keep that in mind as we read, because that's going to come up again. And so he says, for many years, Israel has been without the true God, without a teaching priest, without instruction. But when they turned to the Lord, the God of Israel, in their distress and sought him, he was found by them. And Asa is encouraged by that. And so he goes out and he's like, let's go. Tears down more idols, tears down more shrines and holy places, and turns toward the Lord even more. And then we get to chapter 16, and 16, in the 36th year of Asa, Israel's king. So now we jump back over to connecting with King Baasha in Israel, who has done just as bad, if not worse, than Jeroboam and his family. So he's doing all the same evil stuff, and they go to war, and Asa gets afraid of this for some reason, even though he had taken out this massive army from Africa, no problem, because the Lord went before them and it was not an issue. But instead of trusting in the Lord again, which is what the prophet just told him to do, and I mean, it's a good long time that there's no more war. So, I mean, he did well for a long time, but when it comes to this war with Israel, he gives in and he makes a treaty with Ben-Hadad. And when he does that, when he makes a treaty with an earthly king, a pagan king, instead of following the Lord and trusting in him, the Lord then begins to take things away from him, just like he said he would. He says, if you will stay with the Lord, he will stay with you. But if you abandon the Lord, he will abandon you. In verse 7 of chapter 16, another seer or prophet named Hanani comes to King Asa and says, because you have depended on the king of Aram and have not depended on the Lord your God, the army of the king of Aram has escaped from you. Were not the Cushites and the Libyans a vast army with many chariots and horsemen? When you depended on the Lord, he handed them over to you. And so because of all of this, he has that prophet put in prison, and then he starts mistreating some of the people. And then it gets to the end of his life, and it says in the 39th year of his reign, he developed a disease in his feet, but he's still bitter against the Lord for this prophecy against him and this escape of this other king. And it just like, why? Why do you do the wrong thing? And then why don't you repent? When David messed up, what did he do? He repented and he turned back to the Lord. Look at Psalm 51. Asa's got to have access to that. He could look it up, but no. He stays stubborn. He won't look to that. And he only explores what the doctors can offer and the healers and the medicine workers instead of seeking the Lord. And so the Lord allows him to suffer and then die. Overall, Asa's reign was good. It's the best one we've had since King David, but also he fell short. And at the end, he got pretty hard-hearted and pretty stubborn. And the Lord removed some of that blessing that he had been pouring out on him. What we see in the southern kingdom of Judah is that on occasion, some of these kings turn to the Lord as Asa did. We'll see that with his son, but they really struggle to maintain that, to stick with it. There's always something that's kind of digging away at them, at eating at their righteousness and their consistency with the Lord. And that's a really key thing. I will say, as I'm reading this, what sticks with me is that idea of like being faithful to the Lord and seeing his blessing in our lives. Now, it's not a give to get like, okay, I have given my tithes, I've given my time, I'm serving, I'm giving my talents, and I'm giving my heart to the Lord. Therefore, he owes me all of this. That's not how this works. But he does not honor those who are not following him, who are not for him, who have not dedicated and committed their lives to him and are not pursuing him. He doesn't honor that. Sometimes the way God blesses us, though, is not in, hey, look at how wonderful my life is because I'm following Jesus. And so I can be stoked because I got a new car and I got a nice high-paying job and I got a big house and everything's going right in my life. That is not the indicator of the Lord's blessing in our life. So we absolutely will guaranteed experience the Lord's blessing in our lives if we follow him faithfully. But that blessing does not always take the form of material blessing. And while that principle of follow the Lord and receive blessing is established here through mostly tangible results in this world, we see more and more nuance as time goes on, both in the Old Testament and especially in the New Testament, where then we have things like Paul saying, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength because I've learned to be content. Plenty and in need. I've learned to be content when I'm hungry and when I'm full, when I have a lot, when I don't have anything. No matter what, I trust in the Lord. And that is the thing. I find contentment in him, and he gives us a peace that surpasses understanding and transcends circumstance. For me, I'm encouraged, challenged, and warned to make sure that I am following the Lord and not compromising and not falling short of that I am continuing to turn toward him. So that's what's speaking to me tonight. I would love to hear what God is saying to you as you read through this. And let's talk about your questions and comments in the Bible app or in the comments on this video. Thanks for watching and reading with us. Be rad for Jesus.